Imagine you are preparing to cook your favorite meal. Before cooking, you wash the vegetables, chop them, remove spoiled ingredients, and organize everything. Would you start cooking without doing that? Probably not. The same principle applies to data analysis. Before analyzing data, we must prepare it. And when I say prepare, it means we need to apply data processing. Just like a delicious meal depends on well prepared ingredients, accurate business insights depends on well prepared data. In today's lecture, we'll understand what data processing is, why it is important, and the major activities involved in this. So hi everyone, welcome to Mind Excite. In the previous lecture, we discussed about data acquisition and assumptions, where we collected the data required to solve a business problem and assumed how to do the assumptions right in accordance with the rules that we form, and after talking to or after having a conversation with we'll say domain experts, right? But collecting data doesn't mean it is ready for analysis, right? In data acquisition, we have seen real world data often comes from multiple sources. It may contain errors like missing values, incorrect data formats, duplicate records, or inconsistent information. If we analyze the data directly, our results may be inaccurate, leading to poor business decisions. That's why the next step in data analysis framework is data processing. According to the framework, the data processing is the stage where collected data is prepared for analysis, and it includes these major activities as listed: data merging, data type validation, missing values, outliers, and feature engineering. So data processing is like to clean the data before we start analyzing, because raw data might not be helpful at all. So we want to perform analysis on the structured data. That's why data processing is very important. So let's talk about the very first step that we have to perform is data merging. As already mentioned, in most of these organizations, data is not stored in a single place. Imagine an online food delivery company. Customer information is stored in customer database, order details are stored in sales database, delivery status is stored in logistic database. And now suppose your manager is asking you which company spends the most money and also experience late deliveries, right? Now for deliveries order related, obviously I need to get the sales data, right? And I need to work upon logistic database, right? So can we answer this question in a single database? No, because we need to combine the databases, right? That's where we refer it to as data merging. Think of it like assembling the pieces of a jigsaw puzzle, right? Each data sets provide only one part of the picture. When all the pieces are together, joined together, we'll get a complete view of the business. And without data merging, many business questions simply cannot be answered, right? So multiple files need to be combined in a single place. Yes, we can do data merging in Excel, right? We can combine the data from multiple sheets and get in a single sheet. Yes, some of the techniques that we use, VLOOKUP, HLOOKUP, that we can use. In SQL also we can also do that with the help of joins, right? We have inner join, outer join, so on, that we'll discuss once we reach there, right? Yes, in Python, in pandas, then that we talk about data frames which are there. Yes, we can also combine there also. And even if I talk about Tableau or the Power BI, in Tableau there is one tool which is available, refers to a Tableau prep, right? And even in Tableau public desktop also it's available. We can do merge the data, right? Okay, from multiple sources that way. So multiple techniques are there, tools are there that we'll discuss one by one as we reach there, right? So here we are just trying to understand the process, how to perform this. That will certainly come along the lectures, right? Okay, so first is we'll perform data merging. Now, once we combine all the data, it is very important that after merging, the next step is data type validation also, right? That every column in a data set contains the correct type of information or not, right? Maybe on some of the fields, the date format is like month slash slash dd slash yyyy, but in some of the cells it is it's like hyphen dd hyphen yy, right? So it has to be consistent, okay, whatever we are using. Age, like for example, if I have a age column, it should be stored as a number. Date should be stored as a date, not as a number. Customer name should be stored as a text, right? Sales amount should be stored in numeric value. Few such examples, right? Okay, now imagine that somehow if by mistake or accidentally we store sales amount as a text, will not be able to perform the mathematical operations on that, right? Okay, for example, if I want to find the average sales, so instead of calculating the total sale correctly, the software may treat the values that were as words and produce incorrect results. Similarly, if date appears to be in a different format, sorting filtering becomes very difficult for us, right? That's why analysts validate and standardize the data types before moving to the analysis. That is our second step where we have to be very cautious, right? Then third task is, once the data types are correct, then we'll talk about handling missing values. Multiple approaches are there, right? And there are multiple things to do with that also, because it is quite evident that whatever the data we collect will have missing values. Okay, sometimes the information is not available, entire information is not available, right? So missing values occur when data is unavailable for a given attribute. If the column is not needed, missing values can be ignored, but if it is critical to analysis, they must be handled, right, as missing data leads to incorrect. Now think about, I give you a task that you have to do the analysis of the performance of a student. The very first thing which comes to my mind is I have to do the analysis on the basis of marks of the students. Let's suppose I'll give you 10,000 entries, right? And in that I'll say 10 or 20 entries are missing out of 10,000, right? Now for those entries, we can take a different decisions, right? Obviously, that depends upon certain things. Consider that the values which are missing, and you say you randomly fill that values. Let's suppose the paper was of out of 100 marks, you randomly fill the value here 200. Now that become inconsistent, that the value of an attribute which was missing, you just randomly fill any value, right? That makes the data inconsistent. How can somebody has marks 200? Okay, if you decide you fill the marks between 0 to 100, let's suppose you randomly fill it as 10, but the student might have got 20 marks or 80 marks, then again data become inconsistent, right? Because randomly filling the data leads to inaccuracy, right? Okay, and we definitely don't want. That's why we have fixed methods, and for that it is very important for us to understand statistics. That's why I'll in the future I'll come up with the videos of statistics also, to understand mean, median, mode, to understand the shape of the data, to understand the representation of the data, so that we can understand what decision we have to take. Okay, for if you ask me that how I fill those 20 values, I might take the average of the entire data, right, and then try to fill, because that will be somehow missing. Those missing values guess would be much more closer to the entire data which I have, right, instead of just randomly filling 0 or 200. So yes, we can also have the opportunity to delete the data, but deleting that cell again leads to inconsistent. Suppose you have name, age, roll number, marks, right? And I'll say I have 20 missing values in the marks column. So I cannot delete only 20 cells from the sales data from the marks column, right? Because the 20 rows would be mismatched, right? This is why if I want to delete it, I have to delete the entire row. If your approximately 5 to 10% of the data is missing in your entire data, then it's okay. You can take a decision to delete that. But if some fields which are very important for your analysis, yes, you have to take the decision, right? That how you're going to manipulate, how you're going to handle the missing values, right? Then we manipulate in that case. Yes, if these are numbers in the continuous data, then we'll decide with the help of mean median mode, right? Okay, we'll replace with the statistics as mentioned, right? Okay, so even we can replace with some other methods which are there, right? Okay, forward method, backward method, right? I think we are at initial stage. We are not discussing this is not good here, right? Because that leads to confusion. That's why I'm keeping it for the statistics part, right? But yeah, we need to handle those missing values, giving you information that we can process, right? Okay, so the goal is just not to fill the empty cell, but to ensure that data set remain reliable. Now, once we handle that, then handling outliers is very important, right? Okay, that's why I was saying in the marks field, if you randomly fill a value 200, but what if your most of the students have marks like you randomly fill the value 0 or 10, but most of your student have marks 60, 70, 80, 90, right? Then that number becomes 10 number becomes outlier. But is there any value fixed with which we can decide it is an outlier or not? Yes, we statistics we use one method referred to as interquartile range in order to find out whether the single value is outlier or not. Okay, but any value which is not in the common range of the data is referred to as outlier. And with outliers, we generally try to delete the records containing outlier values, right, when there are errors or irrelevant data. And we also use a bucketing method, like we group extreme values into a defined range, reducing their disordered effects on the analysis we do not want, right? Okay, so we need to handle the outliers also. Any value which is not in a common range, right? For example, in a class, a group of 20 students, out of 20 students, 18 students have marks in between 80 to 90 range, and 2 students have marks in between 0 to 10. So these 2 students are outliers, right? Because the most of the data present in the range 80 to 90, and these 2 seems to be outlier, right? Okay. And next step we perform is feature engineering. Okay. So when we talk about feature engineering, uh, this is the final activity first of all, and means creating new variables. Like let's suppose you have been given a date, right? Date column. Now somebody says you do year wise analysis, month wise analysis, okay, week wise analysis, right? Then in that case you have to stick more information from the given data. That means you have given date. From there you need to check the year, month, right, or day or week separately. This is referred to as feature engineering, means creating new variables from the existing data that helps provide and that helps us in providing more useful information. Okay. Similarly, if I have sales and cost, I can get the profit also, right? Creating a new variable, right? Okay. So these newly created features help analysts answer business questions more effectively and are especially useful in predictive analytics and machine learning. Okay, so with this we have seen all these 5 stages, that how we go from data merging to validating our data types and handling missing values, handling outliers, and to perform feature engineering, right? So each of this step is very important. They are there for a specific task. They perform, right. Okay. So the quality of your entire analysis depends upon the quality of your data. If the data is incomplete, inconsistent, or inaccurate, even the most advanced tools Excel, SQL, Power BI, Tableau, Python, they can't produce reliable insights. Okay, so this is what we have seen in this, that how this data processing, what is data processing, why it is important, and what is the process that we follow, and why each of this process is very critical for our analysis, right? Before we start working on analysis, right? So that's all from my side. I hope the process is clear. Keep learning, keep growing, and follow my Index site for more videos.